Welcome back to the final episode in our series on the book of Proverbs. We've been looking at the introduction to Proverbs, chapters 1 to 9. And the point of chapters 1 to 9 is to persuade us that wisdom is fundamental to life. Wisdom is not an additional luxury. Wisdom is a fundamental necessity. And all the way through these first 9 chapters, we have seen two ways to live. The way of folly and the way of wisdom. We've seen that the way of folly leads to death, but the way of wisdom leads to life. And this final chapter, chapter 9, highlights these two ways to live for us again. And the introduction to Proverbs will leave us with a choice. Which way will we choose? Will we choose the way of wisdom or will we choose the way of folly? Well, take a look at chapter 9 with me. If you have a Bible, would you please open it up? And we'll first begin with the way of wisdom. Wisdom, verse 1, has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine. She has set her table. In other words, wisdom has built her house and she's made a banquet. She's prepared the food and the wine. And then verse 3, she sends out the invitations. Verse 4, this is the content of the invitation. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, come and eat of my bread and drink of my wine. Leave your simple ways and live. So Lady Wisdom gives us an invitation to life. The way of wisdom is the way of life because it is the way that involves relationship with God, trusting God, worshiping God, obeying God, believing in His covenant promises of forgiveness and mercy. And so Lady Wisdom says, come to me to live. Come and enjoy the richest of fare that I've prepared for you. Even if you're simple, even if you're foolish, come to me and I will give you life. Well, in contrast to this invitation by Lady Wisdom, we have the invitation by the woman Folly, verse 13. The woman Folly is loud, she is seductive and knows nothing. Now, I just want to highlight what that phrase means because sometimes when we say someone knows nothing, we mean it as an insult. But the point in verse 13 about Lady Folly is that she knows nothing in the sense that she has no values. She has no reason for living. She has no purpose to life. She has no ethical guidance or purpose. And therefore, the only thing that Lady Folly really appeals to is temporary pleasure and prosperity. Right? So that's why she has to be seductive, and that's why she has to appeal to the very sensual and physical aspects of our existence, because she has no purpose to her life. She has no overarching vision for what life is about. She sits at the door of her house. She also calls those who pass by, and her invitation is very similar to Lady Wisdom's. If you compare verse 16 to verse 4, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. It's almost the exact same phrase. But then she says something very different in verse 17. She says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. So what she does, what Lady Folly does, is appeal to the temporary pleasures of sin. She says, there's something really pleasurable about secret sin, about the kind of pleasure that I'm offering you. And she appeals to the very sensual aspects of people's existence. But in the end, of course, verse 18, the house of Lady Folly is the house of the dead. He does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. So we've seen this again and again, that Lady Folly, her ways have this boomerang effect. Folly always has this boomerang effect. It seems initially pleasant, initially desirable, but in the end, it comes back to hurt you and to harm you. Initially, it seems like honey, but in the end, it tastes like wormwood. Whereas with Lady Wisdom, initially, it's quite hard work. You've got to learn. You've got to listen. You've got to give yourself to instruction. You've got to accept rebukes and correction. And it's hard. But in the end, there is life and abundance and joy. So these two ways to live are highlighted in chapter 9. And then right in the middle of chapter 9, we see this final little comment. Chapter 9 has got this chiastic structure, which means the beginning and the end are very similar, but the middle contains something really different and worth thinking of. And this is how I want to conclude, by looking at these verses in the center of chapter 9. Because the question I think we're left with in the end is, which person will go to which banquet? As we conclude our time in Proverbs, the question you've got to ask yourself is, where will I go? Whose house will I enter? Lady Wisdom or Lady Folly? We're told in verse 7, whoever corrects a scoffer gets abuse. Whoever reproves a wicked man incurs injury. So don't reprove a scoffer. He'll hate you. So we're told again, right at the end, as we were told at the beginning, the one person who can't benefit from the book of Proverbs is the scoffer, is the person who can't accept education. They do not want to learn. They do not want to get corrected. They do not want to get rebuked. They do not want to get told what to do. They can't learn anything because they think they know everything. And so Proverbs says that person is definitely going to go to the house of folly. But, verse 8, if you reprove a wise man, he will love you. If you give instruction to a wise man, he will be still wiser. If you teach a righteous man, he will increase in learning. Right, the person who's going to go to the house of wisdom is the person who accepts correction. It's the person who accepts teaching. It's the person who actually wants to learn and grow and make progress. And right at the heart of that is the fear of the Lord. Verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. I love that description of God in verse 10. He is the Holy One. He is transcendent. He is majestic. He is different. He is above and beyond all that we can imagine. And because the wise person recognizes there is a fundamental difference between me and God, I need to learn from him. I need to fear him and revere him and seek his forgiveness and his mercy and his help. And he is the person who will learn. And here's the promise as we conclude. If you are wise, verse 12, you are wise for yourself. In other words, you are the primary beneficiary of your own wisdom. You're not the only person who's impacted by your wisdom or your lack of wisdom. But verse 12 is so important for us as we conclude. And actually, it's worth memorizing, right? Maybe just write down verse 12 of chapter 9, somewhere for you to look at regularly. If you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. Right? Your wisdom and folly will impact other people, of course it will. But in the end, each person is the primary beneficiary of their wisdom or the primary victim of their folly. In the end, there are two ways to live, and you will be the one who's impacted most by which way you choose. And so I want to appeal to you, please choose the way of wisdom. Embrace her teaching. Give yourself to a study of the book of Proverbs. She is offering you life and honor and dignity and wisdom, the ability to lead justly, to do wealth creation in a godly and righteous way, to avoid sexual immorality, to have a marriage that lasts, to care for others, to love and to serve. Can you see how much Lady Wisdom offers you? God used her in creating the world. Don't you think you need her in building your life? Can I encourage you, as you reflect on these two ways to live, to remember verse 12, if you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. When you choose the way of life. Thank you so much for joining me in the book of Proverbs. It's been a huge privilege to do this with you, and I pray that God blesses you as you study his word.